Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday Learning Bhagavatam class. Today, our guest speaker, Surabhi Mataji, will be speaking on Canto 9, Liberation, Chapter 8, The Sons of Sagara Meet Lord Kapiladeva. So over to you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you to Dharmendra Prabhu for engaging me. I'm very grateful. Today we'll be reading or doing a summary of the 9th canto, chapter 8, on the sons of Sagar meet Lord Kapiladeva. So before we begin, I'm just going to chant some mantras and then we'll start. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shabakaya Chakshurunjitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Svapitam Yena Bhutare Swayam Rupa Ramayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanditam Tam Sajivam Savetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sita Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktahyam Namami Bhaktishatam Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for joining, and somehow every time I'm asked to give class, I just feel so nervous and anxious, and then I realize it's because my mood is completely wrong. I'm thinking it's all about me, but actually this opportunity to glorify the Bhagavatam is such a sacred opportunity, and I just pray that I can be just a channel for the sage's mercy to be transmitted, and that I don't concoct anything from myself into this presentation as I attempt to glorify the Bhagavatam. Thank you so much. So we're currently reading the 9th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which explores the Sun dynasty and the Moon dynasty. So currently we're hearing about the Surya Vamsa, the Sun dynasty, and it leads into the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, which is coming in the next few chapters. So from the beginning of this canto, we've been hearing about the sons of Vaivasvata Manu, who is the 7th Manu. We know there's 14 Manus, and we're currently in the 7th one. And we've been hearing many stories in this canto. We heard about Sudyumna, who was initially a woman named Ila, and then was transformed into a man by the desire of Vaivasvata Manu and Vashishta Muni. And then later was given the boon to spend 1 month as a man and 1 month as a woman. It's a little inconceivable for us in Kali Yuga. And then later we heard about the famous pastime of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. And then we heard about Sobari Muni. And now we're coming to maybe a lesser known pastime. It's not like certain pastimes we've heard about so much, spoken about so much, but this pastime, maybe not so much. In the previous chapter, we were hearing about this descendants of Mandatta, who is another descendant coming down in this Sun dynasty. And now we're hearing about his descendant Rohita, and then it's continuing. So there's many descendants listed in this chapter. And sometimes we think, there's so many names, and we're never going to memorize all these names of the descendants. So what's the point reading it? But it said that just these names bring so much auspiciousness. These personalities have so much strength, so much auspiciousness. They live their lives in such a saintly way that just by reading their names even once, we get benefited. So now we are coming to the pastime of King Sagar. So this pastime begins with a personality named Bahuka, who was disturbed by his enemies and he left to the forest. Then, at some point after retiring to the forest, he left his body. And his wife wanted to accept sati when he died, as was traditional in Vedic times, that when a husband passes away, the wife naturally wants to jump into the funeral pyre with him so that they can attain the same destination. So his wife wanted to also leave her body, but the sage Orva forbade her to. He didn't allow it because she was pregnant. So she wasn't able to leave her body. And Bahuka had some other wives, co-wives, and they were envious of her because she was pregnant. So then they poisoned her. But somehow, by the Lord's arrangement, her child survived, and that was King Sagar, who later became King Sagar. He was named Sagar because it means with poison. He survived. And King Sagar did many saintly activities. He actually, it said that he reformed the many sinful clans like the Yavanas. He didn't kill them. And it's described that he made them dress differently from regular people. He had some of them shaved clean, but some of them had mustaches. Some of them he had wearing their hair loose. Some were half shaven. Some were without underwear, and some were without external garments. And so these different classes of people were made to dress differently, but he didn't kill them, which is quite amazing because usually these the simple classes are it's the king's responsibility to annihilate them. But he didn't kill the uncivilized people. And one of the first lessons I took from this pastime is that he created a space for them to exist. It was a different space where they were dressed differently and clearly marked as different, but they could still exist rather than having them killed. And when I think about our current situation in Kali Yuga and how this mood of mercy, where Lord Chaitanya didn't kill any demons. In the previous ages, the incarnation of Krishna would come and kill the demons, and the demons were clearly marked. They were the devotees and they were the demons. But in Kali Yuga, we have a situation where the demons and the devotees are within the same body. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya could not come and just kill the demons, because if he wanted to do that, he'd kill everyone, because everybody has demoniac tendencies within their heart. But instead of that, he transformed the heart. Lord Chaitanya came and killed the sinful tendencies within the heart without killing the people. And so this kind of reminds me, when I read this part about King Sagar, about how he actually reformed these lower classes as opposed to killing them. I was thinking of the merciful mood, which is very similar to our Srila Prabhupada, who came to the West and reformed all of us who are born outside of India, outside of culture. We didn't have the traditional culture, but instead of neglecting us, he took the time to reform us, and he's continuing to reform all of us. So back to the story. King Sagar was saintly in many ways. And one of the other things he did was he was performing Asvamedha Yagya, following the sage Orva, the same sage who instructed his mother not to accept sati. This is like the sage that, their guru, basically. And under his guidance, King Sagar was performing Asvamedha Yagyas. But as usual, as we've heard many times before in the scripture, the horse was stolen by Lord Indra. Somehow this happens a lot in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, where when someone is doing grand sacrifices, Lord Indra gets a little bit concerned, a little threatened that they're going to become very powerful and steal his position. So somehow he steals the horse. Like he did the same thing to Prithu Maharaj when Prithu Maharaj was doing his Asvamedha Yagya. So Lord Indra stole the horse, and now King Sagar wasn't able to complete his horse sacrifice. So King Sagar had two wives. One was named Sumati and another was named Keshini. Sumati had 60,000 sons, and they were a little bit proud. So they went to search for the horse, and they were like digging the earth, and they made this really deep trench in the earth, which later became known as Ganga Sagar, the Sagar Ocean, when the Ganga River came there. So they were searching everywhere, and they saw the horse next to a big pile of earth, and next to him was the sage Kapiladeva, who was meditating in deep meditation. And immediately they thought, oh, he stole the horse, and they immediately accused him. And they said, here is the man who has stolen the horse. He is staying there with closed eyes. Certainly he is very sinful. Kill him, kill him. And they were shouting like this, all of them together, all 60,000, and with raised weapons. And just that offense to Lord Kapiladeva caused their demise. When the sage Kapil opened his eyes, because he was disturbed by that noise from his meditation broke, he opened his eyes, and then all 60,000 of them, their bodies were burnt up, burnt to ashes. So the horse was still not found, and all the sons were dead. So then King Sagar's other wife, Keshini, had a son called Asamanjasa, and he had a son called Amsuman, who also went around searching for the horse. And now he saw the horse near Kapiladeva, but instead of accusing Kapiladeva of stealing the horse, he understood. He had transcendental vision, and he could see that this was Kapiladeva, the Lord incarnation. So he had a different approach. He went and instead said prayers to Lord Kapiladeva and asked for the horse in return. So Kapiladeva returned the horse, and he could kind of sense that Amsuman wasn't satisfied, like he wanted something more. So then he knew, he could read his mind, and he knew that he wanted instructions on how he could deliver his uncles who had their bodies burned up previously. So he gave them instructions and said that they could only be delivered by Ganga water being sprinkled upon them. So the horse was returned. King Sagar continued his Aswamedha Yagya, and then eventually he retired, handed over the kingdom to Amsuman, the one who found the horse, and attained the spiritual destination. And then later, much later, we'll see in later chapters of the Bhagavatam that the grandson of Amsuman, named Bhagiratha, was able to bring down the Ganges by performing severe austerities. And then the sons of Sagar, all 60,000 of them, were finally elevated by the touch of the Ganga water. So this is the basic story. This is just a summary of this whole chapter. But I wanted to focus on the lessons that I took away from this, because it is a lesser-known chapter, and you could make the mistake of thinking this is just like a filler chapter until we get to the pastimes of Lord Ram, which everybody's waiting for. But this was amazing to read, because another lesson that I took away from this was that assumptions can cause our downfall. If we look at the text, it says that the sons of Sagar, they just assumed that Kapiladeva stole the horse. They just saw it and made that assumption. And they didn't stop to check if their assumption was correct. They didn't ask Kapiladeva. They just took action immediately. And we see so many stories in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam with this theme of someone making assumptions. And we wonder, like, wouldn't it have been easier if they just asked, like they just had a conversation? In the pastime of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni, like that was such a quick assumption and a quick curse by Durvasa Muni. Ambarish Maharaj had been observing a fast, and Durvasa Muni came to his door, and he was an uninvited guest, but of course Ambarish Maharaj, who's a saint, invited him in and then offered him lunch. But then Durvasa Muni went to bathe in the river, and Ambarish Maharaj was getting a little anxious because the time to break fast was approaching, and he needs to break his fast. He has to observe that very strictly, but he also cannot eat before his guest because that's not the etiquette. So then he was concerned, what do I do? And then he consulted the sages. And the sages said, well, if you drink water, that is neither breaking your fast nor not breaking your fast. So it's considered acceptable in this case. So he did that. But Durvasa Muni immediately understood that this happened. And before any conversation, before any question asking him, he just created a demon to go and kill Ambrish Maharaj. And that caused his own downfall. Because when the Lord protected his pure devotee, Ambarish Maharaj, with his Sudarshan Chakra and annihilated the demon, then that same Sudarshan Chakra was following Durvasa Muni all over. It went all over the universe following him. And he went to Brahmaloka, he went to Shivaloka, he went to all these places begging for protection. And Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, nobody could protect him. Even when he went up to Lord Narayan, Narayan said himself that he cannot protect him. So all of that, just because he didn't bother to ask Ambarish Maharaj, he just immediately assumed like he's committing an offense. He didn't find out. And then we have another story. We have the story of Parikshit Maharaj and Shringi, which we know at the beginning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is actually arranged by Krishna to bring forth the Bhagavatam. That's why this whole thing happened. But we can also look at it socially and see how, okay, Parikshit Maharaj was going through the kingdom. He was thirsty. And Samika Rishi was in deep meditation. So he didn't acknowledge Parikshit Maharaj. And out of character, Parikshit Maharaj put a dead snake around Samika Rishi, which is, this is the part where it's really for the pastime to continue. It's so that the Bhagavatam can come forth. But Shringi, a child, just seeing this and then immediately curses him to death in 7 days, like for such a small offense of putting a snake on. Like he didn't ask, there was no communication. He just acted very rashly. And of course, we are grateful that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam has come. But for us to take the lesson that we should also not make these assumptions and jump to conclusions and be very reactive. And then we have the very famous pastime of Daksha and Lord Shiva, where this is something I could never understand, but it's amazing when you think about it, that Lord Shiva is in deep meditation and Daksha comes in and everybody, rises, they stand up to welcome him. And Lord Shiva is just in deep meditation. And there's so many thousands of people there that are acknowledging Daksha, but he notices the two that aren't, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And it's fine for Lord Brahma not to because he's senior to him. But he felt like Lord Shiva is junior just because that's his son-in-law. He didn't consider that spiritually Lord Shiva is way more exalted than him. So he immediately just started cursing and criticizing openly. If you had to picture that situation today, it's amazing. Okay, like, can you imagine being in a whole assembly and one person wakes up and just starts criticizing somebody in the audience? It would be so embarrassing. Like, we'd feel mortified. Having said that, that happens every day on social media. That's become like the Daksha Yagya of the modern age. But Daksha is just making an assumption, just assuming that the fact that Lord Shiva didn't acknowledge him or stand up when he came was because he, doesn't respect him or whatever. But he doesn't ask. He doesn't find out like what was the actual situation behind it. And then so much negativity comes from that. So much degradation comes from that. There's Sati loses her life. There's a demon that's coming and killing everyone. It's just so much like, and for Sati to lose her life just because of this, just because there was an assumption made. So the Bhagavatam has many stories like this. And we can consider in our life, this is very relevant to us and our experience in Krishna consciousness and in general life. Like, why is it wrong to make assumptions? We all do it. We all jump to conclusions and make assumptions about different things. But the main reason it's wrong is because we're not giving people the benefit of the doubt when we do. We're not allowing them to grow. We're not giving them space to grow by just assuming and having our own idea about who they are and what their intention is. We're not allowing them the opportunity to speak and change our mind or change our opinion of them. It's really just coming from our own fears of having the difficult conversations. And if we look at life in general, it's essential in our dealings with everyone, just like not just devotees, but even in the outside world, when we're working with family, whoever we're talking to, we have to learn the art of having difficult conversation instead of jumping to conclusions. And I was thinking about my own personal life. I have so many experiences of just being immature, reactive, not listening, and therefore making it difficult for anyone else to communicate with me. Just because of my lack of good communication, no one else can communicate with me. And so much of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is about communication. We see examples of unhealthy communication or lack of communication. And then we see examples of the right way to communicate. When we look at the very uplifting conversations that happen in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, like between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadeva Goswami, which is bringing forth this whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's the humble inquiry of Parikshit Maharaj and the enlightened discourse from Sukadeva Goswami. We have the same with Vidura and Maitreya. And even the Pandavas, when they were trying to come to a resolution with the Kauravas, their last resort was war. They didn't want to get into war. They didn't want it to go there. So they tried every single thing they could to meet halfway before the war. And that's an example of really like mode of goodness communication, where they're trying their best to avoid a very detrimental situation. And what makes this different is humility. The difference between, really bad communication and good communication is humility. It's that mood of asking questions to learn and uplift instead of thinking that we know everything best. So in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we have examples of humility, of devotees being humble, and then we have the opposite, and it's all meant to teach us of what to do and what not to do. The next lesson that I took away from this chapter is the effect that sinful behavior has on our own physical body. Sinful behavior increases the heat in the body, and that results in our demise. So in the text 11 of this chapter, there's in the verse and in the purport, there's this phrase Mahad Vyatikrama, which means offenses or insults to a great personality. And in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he says, the material body is a combination of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There is already fire within the body, and our practical experience is that the heat of this fire sometimes increases and sometimes decreases. The fire within the bodies of the sons of Sagara Maharaj became so much hotter that all of them burned to ashes. The fire's increased heat was due to their misbehavior toward a great personality. Such misbehavior is called Mahat Vyatikrama. They were killed by the fire of their own bodies because of insulting a great personality. So it's interesting because there's rumors, there's different ways that people explain this pastime, but it's even mentioned here that some people think that when Kapila Muni opened his eyes after being disturbed from his meditation, that he killed them. He burned their bodies with fire emanating from his eyes. But actually, that's not the case. In these verses, in this chapter, that's not the case at all. He is completely pure. He's in Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness. There's no way that passion and ignorance in the form of anger can even touch him. So there's no way he can do something like that. He's the one who brought forth Sankhya philosophy. So he has no friends and no enemies, no enmity towards anyone. So how could he do something like that? It was actually their own offense which killed them. They were offensive towards him. by trying to kill him, and then that's what burned up their own body. So this point of offenses is also very seriously discussed and expanded upon in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. We have so many different examples of the different types of offenses, especially in the ninth canto. I think this canto, it's like this pastime after pastime where people are being offended. Like we mentioned about Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. And in that story, Durvasa Muni committed such a grave offense that he traveled throughout the whole universe and nobody could protect him. Like Brahma couldn't protect him, Lord Shiva couldn't protect him. Even Lord Narayan said, I cannot protect you. You have to be forgiven. You have to ask for forgiveness from the devotee. And what did Lord Narayan tell him? He said, Sadhavo hirdayam mayam, sadhunam hirdayam tvaham, mad anyatena jananti, naham tebhyo managapi. The pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I am always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me, and I do not know anyone else but them. So Lord Narayan is basically telling him how important his devotees are to him, that if you offend them, there's nothing I can do because they are so important to me. And therefore, Durvasa Muni had to go and beg forgiveness. And so that was another example of how Ambarish Maharaj, as a saintly personality, did not actually take offense because he's so saintly. But it's the person who's offending, that's the one that gets hurt. So in this way, Lord Kapila did not actually get upset by them and their accusation. He wasn't offended. But their offense of accusing him killed them. Just like Ambarish Maharaj was not upset. But Durvasa Muni's offense made him have to run away from the Sudarshan Chakra all throughout the universe. So we have other examples of offenses that happen to Vaishnavas in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, like the past time you would have just read on Surabhi Muni and his fall down. And what was the cause of his fall down? The immediate cause was that he saw fish copulating. He was underwater for many, many years doing austerities as a very strict, serious sadhu. And then he saw fish copulating, and then suddenly he became bewildered and wanted to enjoy materially sense gratification with women. And someone may look at that and think, does that make sense? How does seeing two fish copulate, like how would that affect him so much if he's such a serious practitioner? But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that actually it wasn't just that one experience. It's that he had caused an offense to Garuda, who's one of the greatest devotees, because he's the carrier of Lord Vishnu. And that offense is what led to this fall down. So he banned Garuda from eating the fish that were in that part of the Yamuna where he was living. So he chose to protect the fish and basically ban Garuda from coming there. And because he impeded Garuda, that was considered an offense. And then later on, he fell. Because offenses to Vaishnavas actually magnify our weaknesses. So something that would not make us fall down, we become so weak that we do fall down because of our offenses. And this was an example of how Surabhi Muni was just insensitive to how Garuda was feeling, or his plan or his idea of how he was going to eat. He was really stopping him from eating. And then that leads to fall down. So we hear time and time again about how dangerous it is to commit offenses towards devotees, especially towards the Lord himself, like here with the offense of the sons of Sagara to Lord Kapiladeva, such that they could only ever be elevated by Ganga water. Until that came down, they were not in a good position. It said that offenses to devotees freeze our spiritual bank account. So if we think of all our spiritual assets, our spiritual wealth in the form of our chanting, our reading, the devotees we associate with, and whatever spiritual experiences we have, if we can picture it being in like a spiritual bank account, then when we commit offenses, we actually, it's like freezing the spiritual bank account. The assets are still there, but we have no access to them. And therefore, we can't relish the joy and the bliss of Krishna consciousness because of our offensive mentality. We see this example in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in this story of Rupa Goswami, where he's just absorbed in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. So he's meditating, and he's actually, because he's Rupa Manjari, he's actually experiencing that pastime in his mind, and he's relishing it. And so he ends up laughing or, making some kind of gesture. And at that exact moment, a disabled person walked past him and assumed that he's laughing at him. And therefore, that person was offended. So Rupa Goswami had unknowingly offended the disabled person. But immediately, his meditation was disturbed. He couldn't be absorbed anymore. And he knew something's wrong, because he can't feel that absorption in his spiritual practice. And then so he goes to Sanatan Goswami and he tells him what happened. And Sanatan Goswami says, you must have caused an offense to someone. And then he had to go and find out who that person is and had to ask forgiveness. So even unknowingly, if we offend people, it affects our spiritual life so much. So imagine how much worse it is when we knowingly or intentionally hurt or criticize or offend the devotees in any way. There's so many stories in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about this topic because it's so important that we learn to avoid offenses, but also so that we learn that we need to become sensitive and personal. We need to develop personal relationships with people. We need to improve that. And that's why it's important to avoid the offenses. There's this verse that I read long ago in a text called Bhagavad Vyanjanam, which says, even though one may attain great heights in life, and even though one may hold the Lord very close to one's heart, one will certainly fall if one disregards and hurts the devotees who are surrendered to the Lord. So it just shows us how it's not actually possible for us to progress spiritually if we are in the process of causing offenses. If we're insensitive, we cannot advance, because Krishna consciousness itself is about loving relationships. It's about being personal. This is a personal movement. This is a personal process. And Krishna is always reciprocating with us, and therefore we want to reciprocate with him by having good dealings with everyone. In one of the verses in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, he said, I am so pleased with you because of your friendly relationships with each other. So that was in the 4th canto. So it's important for us to learn this. And I'm speaking mostly to myself here because I know I have in personal experience, I have so much of immaturity, and especially correcting others out of place or thinking that I'm doing the right thing. Like sometimes we may think, well, I'm correcting someone and they need to be corrected, so it's not an offense. But actually, if in the process of correcting someone or doing the right thing, I'm causing an offense, and actually I'm doing the wrong thing, it shouldn't be. There's no such thing as doing the right thing and at the same time causing offenses. So we have to think, are we the right person to correct someone? Are we the right person to tell them how to live? Most of the time, we're not. If you really think about it, most of the time, we're not. Sometimes, even if it's our duty, we feel like, okay, it's our duty, so we'll do it. But I know devotees where it is even their duty, but they're still very, very, very cautious. They're extremely cautious about how they interact, because just because it's our duty doesn't mean we're not going to just necessarily get the karma for it, or we're going to, unknowingly offend someone, and then our spiritual life will be ruined. So that's one big lesson that we get time and time again in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And towards the end of this chapter, when Amsuman comes face to face with Lord Kapiladeva, and he can recognize that this is the Supreme Lord, his prayers that he recites are all so profound. They're all about how we are not able to see God while we're under the modes of nature. And he's subtly referring to his uncles here, because his uncles had committed an offense, but instead of bringing it right out and saying it to Kapiladeva, he's saying basically they couldn't see you because they're under the modes, and that's quite natural. Nobody can identify or recognize the Supreme Personality of Godhead whilst being under the modes of material nature, because the modes of material nature are like a contamination on us, goodness, passion, ignorance, whatever it is, we are at varying levels contaminated. And that's why in verse 22, there's mention of keeping external and internal cleanliness. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that very famous verse that we say at all initiation ceremonies and basically all the time, apavitra pavitro va sarvavastam gatopi va yasmare pundarikaksham sabaya vyantara suchi, which means we need to purify ourselves internally and externally. Srila Prabhupada writes, to keep ourselves externally clean, we should bathe 3 times daily. And for internal cleanliness, we must cleanse the heart by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement must always follow this principle, Bhaya Bhyantara Suchi. Then it will one day be possible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. It's an easy thing to understand that we are conditioned. Our senses are conditioned. We cannot perceive anything in actuality. I was just doing a temple tour yesterday for our university students who've never really been to the temple or brand new in Krishna consciousness and are unfamiliar with deities. They're not from an Indian background. So, but they could even understand when I said, our eyes cannot see God. Right now, with our present eyes, we cannot see God. And therefore, we have to purify ourselves in order to be able to see God. And we're fortunate that the Lord comes in the form of the deity, such in a form that we can actually see, because we cannot see Krishna in the spiritual world. But if we, through the process of chanting, through the process of deity worship, through the process of Krishna consciousness, can practice and purify our senses, then someday we can see Krishna face to face. And at the end, there's another really nice verse in one of the purports, in purport to verse 24. There's a beautiful verse by Yamunacharya in the Stotra Ratna. Bhavantam ivanucharan nirantara prasanta nishesha manoratantara kadaham ekantika nitya kinkara praharsa yishyami sanata ajivitam. By serving you constantly, one is freed from all material desires and is completely pacified. When shall I engage as your permanent eternal servant and always feel joyful to have such a fitting master? It's a prayer to basically just asking our own selves and mind, when are we going to be able to do this properly, please, can I engage and be your permanent eternal servant? Because that's going to bring us joy, that's going to bring us joy. That's going to free us from material desires and make us completely peaceful. So what I took from this chapter mostly is that we have to keep ourselves humble and prayerful at all times, in all circumstances, in order to progress in Krishna consciousness, or just to survive in Krishna consciousness, really. Like, over the years, I've been thinking, I think when I was younger, I probably had bigger goals and greater dreams to be something more. But as we get slapped around by Maya and struggle so much in so many ways, it's like, I'm just trying to survive in Krishna consciousness. I'm trying to get through this life while being Krishna conscious. And in order to do that, I have to just remain humble and prayerful. That's going to be the key. So I'll end there and see if we have any points to discuss. Any questions or comments from anyone? We can make it a nice discussion if you guys like.
Thank you very much, Mataji. That was unbelievably fantastic, I must say. we learned quite a lot from there, right? So we got a lot from it, and as you can see, there's some amazing hearts coming your way. So if anyone wishes to ask a question, please do raise your hand. If I can start off, if that's okay, and hopefully some devotees will raise their hands. You sort of initially at the outset said something about the king giving space for these other people, right at the outset, and but should we actually be careful on who we give sort of space to? Because likewise, when it came to Kali Yuga began to ask for space as well. And so, what sort of lessons should we learn from that and this in terms of giving space, if you know what I mean?
That's such a good point. Because at the onset of Kali Yuga, Parikshit Maharaj didn't kill Kali. He also said, okay, you can reside where there's gold and where there's gambling and illicit activities and all of that. So there was a space, unfortunately, for Kali to reside. And in the same way, because now in Kali Yuga, everybody has sinful tendencies and good tendencies within them. We naturally have to be much more accommodating, but of course, with intelligence. Like there's the example of how when you see a tiger, you know that it's a spirit soul, but you don't go and treat it like your best friend or like you would with your family. So we naturally have to have boundaries with who we trust. We have to be intelligent about who we allow into our personal space. We have to have levels and circles of trust, the inner circle, and then like the general population. And then in very severe cases where there's illegal things going on and when people are just doing really, really sinful things, then we have to let the government handle it. The government is there for this purpose of protecting the citizens. And that means we have to, allow them to protect the citizens. If someone is doing something really bad, they have to be put into a different space. Sometimes that space means jail. So for the protection of everyone. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just ask one more, and I'm hoping this is my final one. So please do raise your hand, by the way. Okay. So we've talked about the king's wives and the 1,000 sons and the other son that he had. It's sort of interesting about consciousness in this case, where two families who have been brought up sort of in the same sort of community, same father, etc. But yet their consciousness is slightly different. So how does that sort of add up in a sense? Because obviously you would have thought that the consciousness of both children would be similar, although they had different mothers. But one would think that there shouldn't be that sort of differences.
Yes, it's true. It says that Amsuman and his father was always, doing welfare work, always trying to assist the king. And then you can see with the 60,000 other sons that he had, they were trying to help. They were trying to find the horse for their father. But due to their conditioned nature, they were also proud and therefore made grave mistakes. We see the similar thing in the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj because his father had two wives, Suruchi and Suniti, and both of them were very different temperaments. So you can see how the wives also contribute. Like if they have different temperaments, then their children are going to end up different. And so Suruchi was, envious and like bragging about her superiority. And then Suniti was like, really saintly and know off the scriptures. So, and then that came out, So I think it's the parenting, it's the conditioning, it's so many things. Like if you see, okay, in all times, right? Like Advaita Acharya has 6 children, 3 were atheists and 3 were devotees. Srila Prabhupada has children, and some of them weren't devotees, some of them were favorable. It's hard because parenting is hard anyway. And then when you're trying to parent in Krishna consciousness, it's like a whole different level that you have to be better at, because children are going to just make their own decisions, whatever they do. And now you have to try and inspire them in spiritual life and hope that they don't turn into atheists. And if they do, you can't really control them out of it. You can't, it's like you could do every single thing perfectly right. And one child could be a devotee, one child could be an atheist. So what are we going, it's also like, so many people have said, oh, it teaches you detachment as a parent. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I
No,
have no
that's the
experience, so I have no experience about it. So I'm just saying what I heard
no.
grown-ups say.
Yeah, no, that is true. I do. Yeah, that is a correct life lesson actually. But now comes the killer question, Mataji. Sadhvi Mataji, could you ask your question,
Hare
please?
Krishna, what do you mean? You're making me to look bad. Hare Krishna, thank you very, very much,
Hare
Professor
Krishna.
Mike. Why is that Lord Indra sterning so many times, sterning things? Is it because he wants to have to create pastime for Lord Krishna, or is it really, really his own pleasure to do these things? Why he's doing so many things?
Such an excellent question. I mean, on the one level, everything happens to create a pastime for Krishna. That's always there in all the stories. But actually, Lord Indra is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's not above being conditioned. We know that the demigods have they have great power, they have great opulence, but they're still jivas. They're still jivas, like how we are jivas. They're very, very empowered jivas. But that means they can go both ways. They can fall prey to pride. They can fall prey to all the things that we fall prey to. But for them, because of their great power, it ends up being on a much larger scale where it has a big result. If I become proud, it doesn't affect anyone because I'm nobody. Like if I'm nobody, I'm just living with my family. If I'm proud, it's only going to affect two of them that I live with. But if Lord Indra is proud, then, he's going to send the Samvartika cloud and try to destroy the whole of Vrindavan, destroy all the cowherd boys and Krishna and his friends because he's powerful. So in this way, he's threatened as we can relate. If I'm at my job and I'm the best software developer in the company, and someone else comes and they're suddenly like equal to me, they don't have to be better, but they have to be equal. They have to have the same set of skills as me, and then suddenly I'm threatened, like what's going to happen to me? Everyone's going to like this person better. They're not going to. So this is just in my small world. So Indra, if anyone does Aspameda yagas, they get the auspicious, they get power, they get more and more empowered by the sacrifice they're doing. So if someone does the same amount as him, it's like, okay, now he's afraid for his position, he's afraid he's going to be replaced. So we saw that in the times when he stole, we saw that in the Govardhan Leela pastime where he's really just afraid that, they're not worshiping him, they're worshiping Govardhan. So like he's replaced in some way. So I think there's many reasons why these things happen. Firstly, it's the Lord's pastime. Secondly, it's he's actually conditioned sometimes. Most of the time he's acting as the king of heaven, very powerful, amazing. But then sometimes even he too has the experience of surrendering to the lower nature, which we surrender to probably all the time, but sometimes he surrenders to it too. And then for us, it's a lesson to teach us that if someone so great can also be bewildered, then what chance do I have? How can I be proud if someone who's so far greater than me is struggling to be in higher consciousness all the time? I can't be proud in my spiritual practice because I'm no one. And we see this even with Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma is the creator of this universe, but even he has made some mistakes. Even he has doubted Krishna in the Brahma Vimohan Leela where he stole the cowherd boy. That was also a very grave mistake of him. And then the situation where he actually became attracted to his own daughter, which was in the third canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Those are mistakes. So those are lessons for us, and that's lessons for him also, to know that anyone in any position can surrender to the lower nature that can, have a fall down, we could say, in some way, or make mistakes. So that's what we meant to take away from these incidences.
May I ask a follow-up question, please?
Yeah.
We know that what we are talking about, that not to offense, not to be careful how you talk, and so on and so on. Or demigod also get kind of, I don't want to call it karma, but still it's karma. They do they get also lessons for what they do?
Yes. Yes, they get lessons. I mean, the demigods live in a place where they have very great enjoyment. The heavenly planets are just, the enjoyment is very easy for them. But I mean, we've also seen the difficulties the demigods have gone through, like when the demons are flourishing, when Hiranyakashipu was doing his austerities and all the demigods were shivering and shaking, like what's going to happen? We have to do something. When Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were like ruling the earth in one sense. So it's not always easy for them. And they do learn their lessons. But one thing, because the demigods are more in the mode of goodness, in all the scriptures, when we read the pastimes, we can see that they come to their senses very quickly. Like, it's not like us. Sometimes with us, we can completely fall flat on our faces with something. Like we can get a hard lesson hit, but we won't have the humility to admit, I was wrong, and this is why this happened to me. Like I did the wrong thing, and that's why I experienced this. We'll still be saying, no, but this person did this to me, and this person, I can't believe this happened, and I was going through such a rough time, and that will be our narrative. And then we'll distance ourselves, we'll create feuds with people, even though we did the wrong thing. Whereas the demigods, like Indra, after Govardhan Leela, he was so remorseful. He understood this was a big mistake. Lord Brahma also, after he stole the cowboys, he understood. So they learn the lesson and then they switch, So they may make more mistakes in the future, but they learn the lesson again very quickly. It's very different from us actually, because we have defensiveness. We want to prove that we're right. We want to make an excuse instead of just saying, I was wrong.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mataji. That was a wonderful answer. Vidisha Mataji, exciting. You've got someone new asking a question now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, that is like such a wonderful class, and pulling reference from other cantos, it makes a full-rounded session for us. Thank you so much. So somewhere as you were explaining, and it was kind of summaries of other cantos, is it like Bhagavatam is telling us the superiority of the true Vaishnavas? So it is telling the true Vaishnavas are superior even for the most exalted rishis and Indra and any other kind of administrator or demigods, whichever name we call for. Because it feels like they have been entrusted with the responsibility of showing maximum compassion or helping others to be absorbed from all kinds of sins and everything. Because I don't think like the number of times, as you were explaining about Indra, it feels like so much like Kali Yuga thing, that what we do. It feels like so much like that. But again, he surrenders all the time. And yeah, so it feels like all the cantos that we have been going through and the references, it feels like there is a grand pattern going on, like the superiority of true Vaishnavas. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, definitely. in that verse I quoted where Krishna says that I'm in the heart of my pure devotees, and my pure devotees are in my heart always. I'm always thinking of them, and they're always thinking of me. So you can understand that pure devotees are so dear to Krishna. They are extremely dear. And because of their love and attachment to Krishna, they're not prone to all the same things. When you look at Krishna with eyes of, tinged with the salve of love, like when you can actually see Krishna because of the devotion in the heart, then they're untouched by the material modes even. They're not contaminated in consciousness at all. They're just acting purely for the service of Krishna. So then that exceeds even the position of the demigods, who sometimes will, most of the time, execute Krishna's will, but sometimes make a little bit of mistake. It's very hard to be a pure Vaishnava, though, because we all, as aspiring Vaishnavas, we also commit so many mistakes. We make so many mistakes in our dealings with Krishna and in just our service. So, but if we can somehow become a pure devotee, then that is the highest thing. Actually, we learned that in the example of Lord Chaitanya. He's coming and showing that being a devotee is the best thing we can be. Like, it's better than even being God himself, because Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya, as an incarnation. But he is not acting as God. He's acting as a devotee of God, because he's showing us how much more joy you have as a devotee. Like, Krishna cannot experience the full extent of joy of being a devotee. So he comes as Lord Chaitanya to experience it. So then you know that being a devotee is the highest thing, being a pure. And then to get to the point of pure devotee would be wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And Sadhu Mataji, you've got another question.
Yes, please. I'm so sorry. There's something that I'm just curious to understand there, is that verse 3, Bahuka died when he was old and his wife was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to have many wives, and he seems to be also old. Is there any explanation why they get to marry to so many women and in old age?
In the scripture, you see some of this, actually, that there'll be like an older king with young wives. In ancient times, kings were allowed to have multiple wives, but the condition was that they have to perfectly take care of their wives. So they must be able to provide for all their wives. It's not that they just enjoy sense gratification with their wives. They're actually accepting wives so that they can take care of more wives. In terms of, the wife being younger, him being older, yeah, you get different stories have this, earlier in the Bhagavatam, we had the story of Chaivana Muni, who is like old, and then he was with a young princess. So it was like these things happened in the scripture. And of course, they were able to have children. They had more like power than people now. So it's not like at some point they couldn't have children anymore. So it was like that at that
So
time.
they didn't have this system of varnashrama that we are talking about. When you are in a certain age, you do something, other age, you do something else, and when you come to higher older age, and so on and so on, right? They don't have it?
They had the system of varnashram, because you can see the king at some point he's retiring. And that's that's what the king is meant to do. They're not meant to rule their country or the earth until they die. They're meant to at some point leave and go to the forest. But in terms of when that age, when it would happen, it would be a bit different from right now, because right now in Kali Yuga, we have 100 years. That's like the maximum lifespan. And then so we break it up. 25 years brahmachari, 25 years of grihastha, 25 years of vanaprastha, and 25 years of sannyas, even though that's not super rigid, because very few even live up to 100. So it's like we try our best in Kali Yuga, but these are previous ages also. So it's a little bit different. the lifespan is different. And so the ages in which they accept these different orders is also different.
I remember I read somewhere in one of the cantos that it was a person who was old, and he got his son age to himself just
Yes,
to
Gayati.
yes, just and I was, wow, what is it?
Yeah, just so he could enjoy, he could have
Thank
yeah.
you very much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.